it or put it in an album or put it to a wall. This is the remaking of a photograph. This is ushering it into our own lives in a particular way. And to be rephotographed with the photograph is an attempt to rescue something of the past, to bring those from whom we've been permanently separated into the living space of the present. Next one. So again, we see lots of this in the years after the genocide and the years of exile. And then the next one. What do we go next? So also we have family albums. We have family albums and memorial books, which are part of the same, almost part of the same family. These deal with family history, local history, community history, and national history, and blurring of edges between these things. And as well as there have been collections of stories and songs and the rest of it. They often are collections of pictures. They're an attempt to gather together all the traces of a place and reconstruct that place. And there are many published memorial books, but a lot of them exist as private memorial books, basically as family albums. Next one, please. And then here's a picture from one of those albums, just to show you the pinpricks, the physical vestiges, the physical marks suggest other existences. And the next one. So once again, there's a hole in the picture that suggests the different existences these pictures have had, almost as devotional objects in the home. Okay, next one, please. And then you have the actual engagement of people with pictures, the addition of information to pictures. It's a very important and precious trace of the past, but at the same time, often it's felt that there's not quite enough information there. We need more needs to be added to the picture. So many pictures will be annotated to give you a little bit more information. There'll be family portraits, or there'll be pictures of places. There'll be little journeys through these towns, little notes, almost imaginative journeys through a picture and a no longer existent place. And then you also have the updating of the picture, the acknowledgement that the world has carried on since the picture was made, and that something of what has happened after the taking of the picture needs to be explained in the picture. So many pictures are marked with showing the victims of genocide. Most often there'll be a cross against the person who's been killed. This one's quite unusual in that there are 3 crosses against those who actually survived. Next one. And then sometimes it's felt that there is actually, it's not there's not enough information, there's too much information. Things are cut out of pictures. We extract people from the picture, and they might otherwise get lost or overlooked in the picture. So they are cut out, so that we know exactly what is important. This boy is important. And then the next one. And then you get incredibly complex operations like this one. This is a family photograph made in Harpeth in 1912. Again, it's a picture of migration. We're looking at composite pictures, so the original picture is from this line here, to the right. This is a photograph made to be sent to the father who'd emigrated to America. So once again, it's the picture of a fractured family. And then the family were killed in the genocide. The survivors were the father, because he was safe in America, and the young boy, Serap, this boy here, who went to America by way of France and Syria and was reunited with his father, and as Gorky was, reunited with this old picture. And so he, in turn, remade the picture. He added a portrait of himself as a grown man. He now appears in the picture twice, as a young boy and as a grown man. And then one member of the family is cut out so that the father can be placed. This is a later picture photograph of the father. So The father is reinserted into the picture, the family is reunited, but also the Serop as an older man adds himself into the picture as well. Again, like the photographed family portrait on the wall, this is a way of, well, we can see a lot of work here, but this is a way of bringing the past, bringing the lost past into the present day, of rescuing that lost past and that lost family.
David,
we're done.
Minutes.
Okay, we're all over. And I think we've just got one more picture. So as you can see, people can get very creative with photographs, and some of them are complete constructions, like this one is. This is a wonderful picture that we can talk about for a long, long time. We can point out the Armenian symbols with Anjani and Ararat. But I think what I simply want to draw your attention to is the monument in the centre. This is the monument commemorating the contribution of Armenian volunteers to the Battle of Ara in 1918 alongside British forces under General Allenby. But this monument is itself quite rare. Built public monuments for Armenians are, for a long time, very rare. The monuments that Armenians build for themselves are monuments like this. They build monuments in pictures, and they do it in private. These are the private memorials that people construct for themselves.
Thank you. David, thank you so much for taking us through that photographic journey back to the early 20th century, and to finish our little presentations is Vasgen Kachik Davidian, who is finishing his PhD at Birkbeck, and his thesis is on the representation of the Hamal, the porter, in late 19th century Istanbul, Constantinople, and the realism of the late Ottoman society. Today he will be talking about an imagined Armenia, revisiting Garabet Nishanyan's Armenian wedding in Mush. So Vasgen.
Thank you very much, Gabriel. Hi everyone. Before introducing and discussing Garabet Nishanyan's painting, I really want to introduce two central questions from my PhD thesis. I think that would really explain how this particular image fits into the whole picture. So I have two main questions. There are two main questions that interest me. The first of these is the historiographical question, by which I mean, why are the large number of Armenian artists that lived and worked in Constantinople, Istanbul, in the late 19th century, absent from all art history? While we know for a fact that they were probably the largest ethnic group among operating native artists operating in Istanbul in the 19th century, but there's absolutely nothing about them. We have absolutely nothing about them. So the other thing is we really struggle to remember a single name. How many of you in this room could actually name a single Ottoman Armenian artist? We would struggle, really. After I completed my BA in History of Art, I was in the same position. I couldn't name a single Western Armenian artist. So I thought this would be a very good way of sort of looking into it. The second question, I'm going to expand onto this, but and the second question that really interests me is the methodological question. In short, I advocate the usefulness of using an interdisciplinary approach, i.e. basically bringing in all sorts of different methods of interrogation from all sorts of other disciplines into art history, because I think that's really beneficial. That's really beneficial both ways. First of all, the image, the painting, or the photograph as a historical document which is taking part in history sheds light onto all sorts of other disciplines, and vice versa. We can use all sorts of different methods into sort of shedding light on art history. So, very briefly, returning to the historiographical question, there are three main reasons why Ottoman Armenian artists are absent from history. The first one is within a dominant Eurocentric Western art history, there's not much interest in the painting that Ottoman artists generally, not just Armenian artists, but Ottoman artists in general, actually did produce. They are seen as unworthy of study, they're seen as derivative, and a mimesis of a Western original art, so there's absolutely no value in studying that kind of art, that kind of painting. The second reason is because of the post-1923 Turkification of Ottoman history, and as a result art history. Therefore, any artist that could not be assimilated into a constructed and artificial Turkish nationalist art historical discourse are simply excluded, and the record is erased. The other side of the coin, the writing of an equally artificial Armenian, first Soviet and then Republican art history has produced an imaginary history of Armenian art, where all emphasis is placed on carefully selected works by Russian Armenian or Soviet Armenian artists. And in the diaspora, any art history that considers art outside religious architecture and manuscript illumination is simply non-existent, barely exists. In recent years, some attempts have been made to present Ottoman, and by Ottoman in this particular instance I mean Turkish and Muslim artists, within a post-colonial framework, as resisting a Western colonialist and Orientalist domination. These are fundamentally flawed. I mean, the most obvious one is that the Ottoman Empire was an empire. It was never colonized. We can really go into this in great detail. But as a result, Ottoman Armenian, as well as Ottoman Greek, Levantine, Jewish, Arab, Assyrian artists are absent from these histories. And finally, the visual art production of Ottoman artists is rarely, if ever, examined comparatively alongside the output of other Ottoman and Ottoman Armenian intellectuals, such as writers and journalists. For example, Western Armenian literary historians such as Hagop Oshagan, James Etmekcian, and Musha Vishkhan, who have written seminal histories of Western Armenian or Ottoman Armenian literature, rarely mention, if ever, or engage with the visual arts. Yet these works are as part and parcel of the dominant intellectual currents of the day, such as realism, romanticism, and symbolism, as a literary text they analyze. In short, the aim of the question of the thesis is to look at the visual art production of Ottoman artists, many of whom were Armenians, and examine the ways in which they represented the world around them, projecting their particular worldviews onto canvas as conditioned by and within their social, economic, intellectual, political, and historical contexts. Realism being the dominant intellectual philosophy of the last 2 decades of the 19th century is of central interest to me. So for the purposes of today's workshop, I'll be presenting one main image, and the image is a photograph of a painting, because we don't really know where that painting is. The painting was sold in Istanbul in 1890, and it made its way to the United States, and no one's ever seen it in public since then. So we have absolutely no idea where the painting actually is. I recently launched an appeal on Facebook, so trying to find out, do you know where this painting is? So, and the interesting thing is people kept on coming to me saying, well, someone's actually looking for this painting, do you know where it is? I said, no, it was actually me trying to find it. So, anyway, so can we have the first image, please? And this is the painting. This is the photograph of the painting. The photograph was taken in 1890. It's an albumen print, and you can see it's not in a great condition, but it is. It's pretty much usable. And I came across this while I was working in the Nouvarian archive in Paris. I was going through their extensive archive of newspapers, and I just came across this image in a box that had been titled Group Photographs, and I opened it, and this was the first picture in it. And it was really bizarre because it was a photograph of a painting, and it was the only photograph of a painting. There was absolutely no information about what it was. It just said Mariage Arménien, Armenian wedding at the back, and that was it. But somehow it felt familiar to me. I couldn't actually put my finger on it, why it felt so familiar. Then I realized it hadn't actually been published in a couple of books. It had been published in one of the Hovhannisyan Armenian books. He organized lots of conferences, and he published a book after each conference, and it appeared in actually one of those. and it also appeared in Kevorkian and Pampukjian's Ottoman Armenians photographic book. But neither of them actually knew who the artist was. There was no title. They just published the photograph as a photograph saying Armenian wedding, and that was it. So that was one thing. The other thing is, suddenly I realized that by that time I had spent months working in the Bulgarian archive, I'd come across an essay, a review in a newspaper. It was a newspaper called Arabak, which was the most important Armenian language Istanbul newspaper at the time, in terms of realism. It was started in 1884 by the high priest of Armenian religion, Armenian, and provided a space for Armenian writers, journalists, and express themselves there. So there was a very, very long and extensive review of this painting. And the review was really, really unusual because it gave us so much information. There was so much descriptive information as well as analytical information. So you actually you could read into the mind of the writer, the reviewer, who signed with a pseudonym, Taparit, which basically means wanderer. But that was one of the pseudonyms that was actually used by Levon Pasharyan, who was a key realist author in late Ottoman Istanbul. And also a lot of analysis. So, can I have the next? And here I've sort of cut and pasted the whole sort of review for you. I've gone through thousands and thousands of pages of Armenian newspapers in the Bulgarian archive, and I can tell you that I have never come across a review as extensive or as long as this. It's really, really unusual. So Taparit basically goes through this review. He describes the painting in great detail. He counts 18 people there. I could only count 17. I've tried lots of other people to sort of count it as well, and they come up with 16 or 17. But sort of so he probably miscounted. But this was basically the review. He starts by describing exactly how he came across this particular painting. So we know that the painting was shown in a shop owned by the Kosygin brothers in Shark Chashasa. So Taparik expresses his admiration, felt equally by the eye and the heart. So note the emotion with which he's actually describing the painting. For the picture, and urges others to partake in the national pride. He uses Askain Babityun, so national pride that he felt experiencing the actual work. So he starts by giving a vivid expression of the work, its scale, the different characters and items portrayed. He describes every single item. I mean, for example, there's an apple on a spear. What does that mean? There's garlic hanging from the ceiling. So there's a lot of description. There's a lot of ethnographic material there. So there's a lot about Armenian weddings, rich folklore, costumes, traditions, etc. I just want to read a little bit from this in English translation. So Taparik goes, and the picture's verisimilitude and accuracy is truly wonder-inspiring. In order to accurately execute the typical character of those provincial faces, of all the items of clothing, of all the costumes, to carry out the truthful expression of all the wedding items and fixtures. With their local colour, Nishanian Effendi has undertaken all the troubles that an artist of conscience, he uses the term Khırcamit Arvestaket, an artist of conscience, has ungrudgingly taken upon himself to search every corner of our capital for all the types that can best fit in his work, by all means winning over every one of the provincials' naturally inborn untrustworthiness and instinctual unwillingness. So we're essentializing, we're orientalizing and essentializing the provincial. He uses inborn panadzin, instinctual. By convincing and begging the provincial women so that they would come and sit opposite him to pose for hours and serve as examples, types, and yet the result has amply rewarded all his troubles. So there's much that can be revealed by this text, both the snippet presented and the wider review. I shall just note a few of them. Firstly, we see that the artist believed that he had produced a work of great realism and truthfulness. Similarly, the reviewer, viewing public of 1890 Ottoman Istanbul, received the work as a realist work. This realization immediately situates the painting within the wider intellectual space of the so-called Istanbul Armenian realist generation, the Iravash Servant, of which I said, as I mentioned earlier, Alper Arpyayan was a key figure. But for a period from 1884 until about 1900, up until the genocide, realism was really, really a dominant intellectual philosophy among these Armenians, and not just among the Armenian community, among all the other communities of Istanbul as well. So it's not just a unique Armenian phenomenon. Thirdly, much information is provided about the artistic practices of the day, the art market, the role of the artist, etc. For example, we know for a fact that Nashanian had never been to Mush, had never been to Armenia. So he just wandered around the streets of Istanbul and he found all these provincials and he got them to his studio and he painted them. So this is very, very interesting because a lot of Ottoman art history suggests that Ottoman artists just painted from photographs. So we know here that there's an Ottoman artist who's basically just going in the streets, grabbing people from the street and basically taking them to his studio and painting them. So, but who were these people? These were migrant workers, thousands of them who had flocked to Istanbul. A lot of them were from Mush, from the plain of Mush, a lot of them from Van. A lot of them worked as hamals, porters in Istanbul. And so these are the people who actually acted as his models. Then it also sheds a complex relationship between the Armenian so this really sheds the complex relationship between the Ottoman Armenian from the capital and the provincial, as well as the intellectual and the migrant worker. So it's very, very interesting to examine all these different interrelationships. And identity is also very, very important because these chaps never consider themselves to be Istanbul Armenians. They consider themselves to be Mushetsis. They were from Mush, they were from Van. So they had a completely different identity. And they weren't actually regarded by the Istanbul Armenians as part of their community. So when we talk about an Istanbul Armenian community, I think that's wrong. There are lots of Istanbul Armenian communities that still coexisted. Hagop Siruni writes of a mosaic. The Armenian communities of Istanbul are a mosaic, a constantly shifting and changing and moving mosaic, which basically is continuing to this day. It keeps on changing. The profile of every single generation is different. I could really, really go on. But really, really sort of, what I feel is that both the image and the text raise as many questions as they answer. Can I have the next? This is, I mean, anyone who knows me will probably know that I've been obsessed with this image for at least 2 years. It's another Istanbul Armenian painter called Sinan Agopyan, and this is a very, very interesting painting of Hamals on the bridge at Karaköy. So just consider the idea of realism, and the artist would have crossed this bridge so many times a day. He would have seen this. So this is a completely different kind of realism than the realism that is actually being shown in the image that we're talking about. Here, we're looking at almost like a theatrical set. They've all been arranged. It's very, very static. How much can an artist who has never been to Ottoman Armenia tell us about Ottoman Armenia? And it's very interesting. You probably can't see it, but at the back, right at the center, there's a traditional Armenian architectural sort of Armenian church dome together with a castle. The word Armenia is never, not once mentioned in the article. By that time, it was actually banned. Just like Macedonia, censorship did not allow the use of the word Armenia. So why has the artist decided to talk about Mush? And there's so many works of art about Mush, it's girls from Mush, people from Mush, etc. So Mush seems to almost stand in for Armenia, which doesn't seem to have any boundaries, it's an imagined kind of Armenia. This is how he actually sees it. I could go on about this thing for hours, but obviously we don't have hours here. So I shall finish by just saying that despite all the unanswered questions, in the absence of first-hand testimonies, such as letters and diaries, we are still able to have an insight into the artist's intentions and thought processes. Consider, for example, the following note from an earlier article published again in Arabic on the 30th of November 1886. At the end of the article, Arpia Arpiarian looks forward to the culmination of Nashanian's desire to paint a wedding scene with Armenian types. So this is 1886, and the painting was completed and sold, exhibited and sold in 1890. So we've got a period of about 3.5 years. So we can actually see the thought process of the artist and how he's actually dreaming and working and conceptualizing how he's actually going to represent an Armenian wedding. So the two articles almost sort of bracket the image itself. This very short discussion of Armenian wedding in Mush has generated many questions about the yet insufficiently explored artistic production of the late Ottoman artist. These questions are as important as the fragments of information that art historians stumble across and through which attempt to put together a convincing representation of an art historical moment. The 1890s album and photographic print of a painting, which has not been seen in public for 120 years, is such a fragment. As such, it can be utilized as a historical document to shed light upon a complex late Ottoman and Ottoman Armenian society and its art. Removing the work from such a context diminishes its ability to generate meaning. On the other hand, viewed and considered within it, this painting, and others like it, reward the present-day art historian with a fascinating glimpse into the way a late 19th century Western-educated, urban, Constantinople Armenian intellectual imagined Armenia without ever having set foot there. While doing so, it also challenges the way those of us with roots in the Ottoman Empire remember our very own lost Ottoman Armenian worlds. Thank you very much.
Right, Vasquez, thank you so much for your wonderful paper on Armenian painting. But now, please, can all the speakers come to around the table? And we are missing Nuritsa. I mean, first of all, are there any questions for our speakers? Yes?
With all this very interesting intellectual material and the young generation of people who have gone into a depth that hasn't been done before after genocide, wouldn't it be a good idea to put all this together and for future generations of Armenians and produce literature or anything that, digitalized or whatever, something that we can sort of hold on to after this, because, as you know, it's just being eradicated. And it's very important, whatever we can find, to just record.
But you want to answer?
Can I answer, Annie? It's really interesting what you said, but for example, Nuritsa's journey appears in the book on Arshil Gorky, and Annie's was made into a film, which is on the Al Jazeera website.
I've seen both. I have the book and I have seen the film.
Yeah.
So they are all there.
Absolutely.
But for people who are not so exposed to it, how can we sort of make the whole thing more exposed? I think as Armenians, this is our problem. We're not exposed enough with our problem.
Can I? The Armenian Institute, for instance, we're here to do this job. We organize conferences, we organize things. It's on the website. I mean, nowadays we're there. I mean, I don't know what else. I mean, we really try.
I think my question is, I think so, if I may. My question is that if you watch television, you are bombarded with the problem, say, of the Jews, the Holocaust, and I'm just bringing the Jews as example because it's the other very good example of genocide and a nation that has survived and how they've survived. You have no choice, it's there. For us, somebody has to be interested to go and look for it. That's my point.
Can I answer that one very briefly? You see, we have to remember the Holocaust was in the heart of Europe. It's on the conscience of Europe. So therefore, in the European media, a lot more. What happened to the Armenians, it's not in the consciousness.
We have to bring it to the consciousness. That's what I'm saying.
Fine.
But also you pointed, Vasquez pointed out a website to me, just been